New York, where my colleague and consulting editor of DD India, Sakal Bhatt, joins us with expert analysis ahead of the big day there in New York. The 9th International Yoga Day celebrations are set to take place, led by Prime Minister Narendra Modi at the North Lawns there. Yes, Sakal, it's over to you.
Thank you very much, Munmun and team Newsnight from New Delhi, our Delhi studio. It's a good afternoon, almost noon right now from New York here, and with that we must also tell our viewers of DD India watching it from India and abroad that the final countdown for Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's touchdown in New York has already kicked in. We're bringing to you this special edition of Newsnight from Midtown Manhattan, as they call it, one of the popular hotels here, high-profile hotels, Lotte New York Palace. This is where we are expecting Honorable Prime Minister to come in the early afternoon, and as we get into the conversation that I particularly have been really waiting for many days, because I have with me very distinguished voices, whether you talk about the Indo-American community here or you talk about the yoga, international yoga scholars or exponents. Let me, of course, David Frawley, who is joining us from New Mexico. But let me quickly, first of all, introduce my guests on this special broadcast from New York for DD India. Chris Tompkins on my right here. Chris Tompkins, namaste from India. He's yoga exponent, and Chris is from Harvard University and faculty of Berkeley University. And Chris has been studying yoga, Ayurveda from a very, very tender age. He's going to tell us more about that as well, the India-America and how yoga is binding the friendship. We also have with us Munmun, Colleen Breecknar. Colleen Breecknar on my left. Wonderful Colleen. She's a yoga teacher, very popular, by the way, in New York. Yoga scholar from New York, and her hands are full for all the training sessions. I literally had to get her out of a yoga class. And very happy to have with us Mr. Rakesh Kaul, Indo-American Arts Council Vice Chairman, very renowned and noted author. By the way, about him, we must tell our viewers, his grandfather was the first Indian 40-50 years ago who addressed United Nations on a bit about yoga also. I think that conversation there. Yes. So he's going to tell us more about that, and it's very, very, it's an honor for us to have all the way from New Mexico joining us David Frawley, international renowned yoga and Ayurveda expert. Mr. Frawley, thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to quickly start with you, Mr. Kaul, because you are also part of this Indian American diaspora apparatus or setup, and you guys have been really working very hard for this day and for tomorrow. Now, just to give us a sense, though we have been reporting a lot on this, on how this is being viewed by Westerners, by Americans, but what makes this particular visit of Prime Minister Modi to America so very special? Not the diplomatics, not just that the whole first maiden or state visit, but this whole yoga build-up, the conversations that are revolving around Indian Prime Minister Modi and India's soft power growth story.
Yeah, so first, thank you for having me. And what I would say is, today is a red letter day because it fundamentally establishes that Indians have a VALS global leader. What do I mean by VALS global leader? VALS means values and lifestyle. Yoga is, of course, the greatest export of our values and lifestyle. And I commend Prime Minister Modi that while over the course of 100 years, other ambassadors have come bearing the gift of yoga to America and the West, it is Prime Minister Modi who demonstrated the leadership to say the world has to embrace it.
And Colleen, in the last 9 years, the sea change that you have seen, the shift, you already, I think, know what I'm going to ask you. Why is it, and what is the X factor, especially the yoga?
I see a greater embrace of the roots of yoga here in America, and I think that's largely in part due to Prime Minister Modi's influence with the International Yoga Day. Yeah.
But overall, what's the sense that you've got, the change that you've seen on ground? I mean, yoga wasn't that popular if you look back a decade ago in America, and now everybody seems to be talking about it. And it is just not merely a coincidence that you have United Nations headquarters here and where our Prime Minister is going to lead the session tomorrow.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, I love that everybody is doing yoga now in schools, all around. There's not a person that you meet here in America that doesn't know yoga, hasn't practiced it in some capacity in some place here in America. Yeah.
It seems that India's yoga as a soft power, Chris. First of all, what is it that enchants you about it? And we were also having this conversation about how the Indian Prime Minister Modi has been instrumental in making it an international brand.
Yes, I mean, when we're talking about the yoga tradition at large, we're talking ultimately about a science, and it's a science of what the Indians called and what we still know to be a science of self-realization that might be known to most people as a physical exercise at first glance. And this is really the doorway in. And what we see now, I think, with what the Prime Minister's done with International Yoga Day, is we have this collusion of different cultures that recognize this movement of, say, Surya Namaskara, and that intrigues us to go deeper. What is behind that? Why are we doing this practice, and what can we still uncover from these source texts, into which we're still taking baby steps in uncovering? And so to me, it's like it feels like a more of a joint effort, honoring the motherland as we humble ourselves to learn more about what the science is all about.
Let's now go across to David Frawley. David Frawley ji, if you can hear me, first of all, Chris and Tom Chris and Breecknar. Yeah, Colleen have been extremely delighted. So is Mr. Kaul, Rakesh Kaul, who they just came to know that you're joining us on this broadcast. They're sending you their hello and namaskar from New York. Your thoughts on this particular visit of Prime Minister Modi? I mean, we just want to hear you. Is this going to be a big first, a big history when Indian Prime Minister leads the session in the heart of the United Nations headquarters? David Frawley.
Hello? I'm not able to hear you.
Can you hear me? Yes, go ahead. David Frawley, sir, we can hear you. Go ahead, please. Mr. Frawley, are we connected? Can you hear us from New York?
Yes, hello?
Yes, David Frawley, can you hear us? You can share your thoughts about this 9th edition of International Yoga Day led by Indian Prime Minister.
Hello?
If you can hear me, can you hear me? Okay, I would request my technical team in Delhi, production control room, to fix that. Meanwhile, we can continue with our chat with Mr. Kaul and our guests here. There's a lot of talk about how India enjoys or perhaps has the back of many UN nations, and almost all. Mr. Kaul, you remember in 2014 you were here when this resolution was passed by humongous consensus and support by other nations. And again, India took the lead there. And these 9 years culminating in such an event which has never taken place in the history of United Nations, of such magnitude and expanse.
Look, at the end of the day, everybody is realizing the opening line of Patanjali Yoga Sutra is just 3 words. Thousands of years ago he wrote, and now yoga. What did Patanjali mean? Meaning, now that everything you have tried, everything that you tried failed, now you have come to yoga. So that message for the individual, now the world is realizing. The world is realizing what Chris just referred to, that the science of yourself, the science of knowing what is it to be a human, which is what is the essence of yoga and its power. That is a science that humanity has to embrace. Doesn't matter which nation, which culture, which religion. And that is why they all voted, because they understood Yoga will be the savior of humanity.
Yoga is the future, so India is the leader.
Yoga was the past, yoga is the present, yoga is the future, yoga is eternal.
And that's something which is India's gift to the world, and the way Prime Minister Modi has actually propagated in the last so many years. 10 years ago, we never had this conversation, you would agree.
I've been in this country for 50 years. Yoga was considered to be a cult activity. And today, as Colleen has pointed out, it's a mainstream activity where children, young children are brought by their parents to get started on this journey. And absolutely, yoga is seen as something that is a universal gift that every human being has. But yes, it is in India. It is in India that its discovery, its powers were over thousands of years studied. And we were the recipients of great Illuminati, starting from Adi Yogi all the way today, even Sadhguru and others. And then, of course, Prime Minister Modi, each contributing to the ocean of yoga. And within that, as a Kashmiri Pandit, I'll say, Kashmir has had a very special role to play in terms of its darshanas, the Vigyan Bhairav, Stotra, all the great texts of yoga of Kashmir.
Finally, all this is getting a tremendous amount of global recognition, global attention, and that's and the reason or this can be actually attributed to the way India, an Indian Prime Minister, has made it a global brand and talked about it at various platforms, and the way world has embraced it, particularly America.
America, what we know about yoga is just a small portion, to maybe 2% of the yoga teachings. And so what I'd like to see happen here is that knowledge to really open up. So we bring back the roots of the practice here to America, so the people who are learning an authentic Indian practice. Yeah.
Okay. Yoga master Colleen calling authentic yoga, Indian yoga practice. I think that is one that speaks volumes of the fact how this has really cut ice with America, and to tell us more about how and why it has cut ice with America. And not only just let's Chris, take this conversation beyond yoga. And you've been also a keen observer of India-American relationship. We'll not discuss the politics of it, but you know the shift, the paradigm shift that we have seen, especially between the Biden administration and Prime Minister Modi. Has there been this sort of build-up as far as the American civil society is concerned for Modi's welcome, Prime Minister Modi's this particular visit? Because this is, remember, a state visit that your president has accorded to my Prime Minister.
Right. So, and as we now know, this has been an annual celebration that's celebrated not just in India and America at large, but it's spread out in all these little wonderful micro communities. If you look online on Facebook, dovetailing out of the advertising for this event here, there are so many communities that are coming together and are learning that this is not just an isolated practice done in, say, yoga studios in different parts of the world. There's a synthesis and an identity consciousness that stems from texts like the Patanjali Yoga Sutra. And what's also happening in terms of this relationship is a resurgence of exploring the source texts on this ancient practice that are now coming back to the surface after centuries of occupation in India. So to me, what I see with this visit and with this trip here on the solstice, I mean, this is really just the collective consciousness coming through the yoga practices, and hopefully we'll, again, taking baby steps, we'll learn where the real depths of this practice resides. And for me, that's particularly by mining the sacred scriptures of Kashmir. And that's where I spend most of my time as a bookworm studying.
What do you have to say about the Vasudeva Kutumbakam, one world, one family message? That is, of course, the central theme in this 9th edition of Yoga, International Yoga Day, that's going to be going across to the globe from United Nations headquarters tomorrow morning. It's India as a centerpiece.
Yes, to me, Bharata, the homeland, is a place where the consciousness of this yoga thing, whatever we're going to call it, this attempt to actually explore, discover, and reawaken who we really are, bubbled up and surfaced through the collective wisdom of ancient India. As I've been teaching for years, I study and learn more about what I'm studying. And what I've learned is that this is a human consciousness, this yoga, and for some reason, many reasons too big to go into today, I think, India is its birthplace, and it's also the home that's reaching out to all of its extensions here, and it's a coming together of one consciousness once again. Yoga means union and connection, but also reconnection.
Before I go to others, do you think this has been, the yoga has played a very instrumental role in bringing Indians and Americans, or Indian Americans and Americans together? That convergence, that collaboration, which was not there earlier, maybe a decade ago. There was this sense of mistrust. Now there's a sense of warmth, and there's a sense of oneness, if I may be allowed to use the word.
Yes, just to say real quickly, when I was 18 years old, I went to India to study yoga and find a guru, and I wound up doing physical practices with a bunch of Westerners under the tutelage of a guru named Patabi Joyce when I was 18. At the time, I felt like, oh, it's just the Westerners practicing. And then suddenly this resurgence of people doing Namaskar, Surya Namaskar all across the Indian subcontinent and beyond, and I see the multicultural rebirth of this thing that to me has been a radical shift in the last 15 to 20 years, and it's really one in which the West is finally starting to truly respect and embrace its Indian roots, particularly in the places like Kashmir where this yoga really crystallized into its greatest height.
So West is embracing Indian roots. Before I take final 10 seconds from my other panelists, I would just want my PCR to communicate to me if we have David Frawley connected with us, because he really wanted to be, so much as we wanted him to be part of this special discussion. So we could quickly go to him for 10 seconds. Your final message, Mr. Kaul, meanwhile, can you just spill some beans? What is expected when Prime Minister Modi comes here? Because I think there's a lot being done. The welcome ceremony, there's talk about Mala, and there's talk about Indian diaspora going to do some sort of small gig when he comes here. Can you tell us more? What is expected?
Look, this visit is unprecedented. It is history in the making, and there's no question India has emerged as the fulcrum power in the global community of nations. As the fulcrum power, India is stabilizing the world, India is creating peace where it goes, and Prime Minister Modi's visit is the embodiment and recognition of India's role.
Okay. What's your message?
Well, I hope I can catch a glimpse when he comes.
You can catch a glimpse of Mr. Prime Minister Modi?
Yeah, that would be nice. That would be lovely. I think it'll be good for the United States and India to spend more time together, collaborating and bringing peace together. As
You were earlier telling me about the connect that you see between the two.
I mean, they're both kind. They seem both kind and sensitive. Yeah, and interested in unifying, which is
Okay. Finally,
Yoga, the verbal root of yoga is yuj, which means to connect, yujite, connection, the United Nations. We are reconnecting through this visit with a greater sense of who we are as a spiritual community practicing yoga around the world. And this visit on this day, the solstice in particular, being so sacred in these ancient texts, is really touching to my heart that I'm alive to witness this.
okay, well, he says this is something which is touching to his heart, and he's really glad to be alive to witness this as in what happens tomorrow.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes, very much so, and I'm honored to be a part of it.
And we're very honored to be a part of this one where we have you and Colleen and Mr. Kaul and Chris. Thank you very much for joining us, all three of you. And with that, it's back to Munmun in our Delhi studio. But you know, Munmun, you would agree that the message from here is loud and clear that it is India's time. And it's the India way, as they say it, and he's already nodding. And yes, it's going to be very, very interesting. We're waiting for the visual of Honorable Prime Minister Narendra Modi conducting that yoga session tomorrow. Remember, we brought those exclusive visuals of the venue. And very, very interesting to see. We're waiting for that when both President Biden and Prime Minister Narendra Modi will see each other face to face. That's the warmth we're waiting to see. Thank you very much, all of you. And it's back to our Delhi studio in Munmun.
Thank you so much, Sakal, for getting us an array of diverse and crucial voices from New York ahead of the 9th International Yoga Day. All roads are leading to New York, to the North Lawns particularly. Thank you so much for joining us. And let's go back to Richard Rosso, who is